How are you managing to maintain that level of communication and consistency throughout the organization?
Great. So we have one of the benefits of Sunrun is we're kind of the only company of our kind. We're fully vertically integrated. We do every step of the process. So most people that do solar and are not Sunrun, they'll do a piece of it and then they'll kind of like cobble together a business by using other partnerships. So if I'm talking to you on your doorstep, I'm not talking to Ed Kerr on his doorstep. I'm talking to a man who is dealing with life inside of his house, who might have an earbud in, who just came from work, and who has something coming up. And so if I get initially 15% of your attention, that's actually pretty good. I hope that by the end of the conversation, I have 30% before I transition into your home.
I think sales leadership and try to empower somebody, particularly someone who's brand new, and understanding the differences that they have from you, whether it's, as you mentioned, ambition, motivation, talent, but trying to empower someone to be the best that they can be it takes a certain awareness and a certain patience and a certain, I think, understanding of human nature. And I think every organization has, so many different people coming through the door every week, yours especially with such volume. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Sales Elevation Podcast. I'm Ed Kerr, and I've got my guest today is Ty Williams of Sunrun. Ty, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah. So today we're just going to talk about your sales leadership and your experiences as a sales leader. Obviously, you've had an impressive career at Sunrun and prior to that at Vivint. And I guess right out of the bat, let me ask you, with your teams today, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in managing a large sales team today?
Yeah, great question. So I run a direct-to-home sales force, nationwide door-to-door sales program where we run a seasonal program and we run a year-round program, but it's mostly individual agents in communities and neighborhoods generating their own leads off of their own individual effort. So that is, that's its own stack of challenges of figuring out how to appropriately incentivize people, train people, drive people, have them creating the kind of lives they want on our platform. But we're in the solar business. So solar is complex, right? They're individual, custom construction projects. And the industry is pretty closely tied to policy, energy, regulation, and things like that. So you're catching us at the tail end of the summer of 2025, which will kind of go down in history. That was the one big, beautiful bill era. The biggest challenge often is the things outside of our control. That's actually probably universal. So, policy really impacts us, right? And so making sure that we're telling that story to the right people at the right level to get favorable outcomes for the industry and for the people, that's probably been the biggest challenge. And then there's a balance of, making sure you have a favorable base to work off of so that you can then go and control the things that you can actually control.
Yeah. And that's got to be really difficult, especially in your industry. And especially, as you mentioned, this past summer, so many changes, communication is critical. And how are you managing to maintain that level of communication and consistency throughout the organization?
Great. So we have one of the benefits of Sunrun is we're kind of the only company of our kind. We're fully vertically integrated. We do every step of the process. So most people that do solar and are not Sunrun, they'll do a piece of it and then they'll kind of cobble together a business by using other partnerships. For example, we create our own paper, we raise our own capital, we do our own installs, we do our own, we keep our customers long term, we service our customers, we bill our customers, we do all of the repairs, the whole kind of gambit. And so we're very heavily staffed, honestly. We have kind of elite teams, not just in sales, but we have elite teams in policy and we have elite teams in finance. And so we have a very cohesive executive team. It's actually probably the most cohesive executive team that I've ever been a part of that knows how to appropriately grant stewardship to people. So for example, I'm over the direct-to-home sales force. And I know exactly what my role is. I know exactly what my metrics are. And I know exactly what's expected of me. And we try to emulate that all the way down the org, right? But the same is true of the finance group and most recently the policy group. If we're talking one big, beautiful bill, they had to create a whole strategy. And then the cool thing is it's all kind of sales, right? Everything is just strategy and an idea until somebody puts traction to it. And so really what they had to do is they had to go to Washington and they had to tell the appropriate story. Because the general public and especially the kind of political people that run the country have of solar is inaccurate. It's wrong. It's old. And so we had to go in there and help them understand, just like in any sales process, hey, this is the problem. Here's the solution to the problem. And here's what we need to do moving forward. And so thankfully, like we used a really effective policy team. Our CEO is like a very effective high-level leader that kind of deployed this movement to where they told the right story to the right people. We got a really favorable outcome. And as they were in Washington kind of working through that, we had daily downloads. So the policy get on and say, hey, here's kind of for you guys what it's looking like. Here's what you can share with your people. Here's what we're hoping for. And here's when you'll hear from us again. And some days it was one or two bits of information that was like kind of nothing new. And then some days there was material information. But when I think it's John Maxwell that says, when was the last time you gave vision to your people? And if the answer is not today, they're overdue. What might seem small to you as a leader, or it might seem like run of the mill, you have to remember that a lot of the people that aren't in that same conversation don't have access to that information. And so it's never a waste of time to give vision, ever. Like even just to, I think of like, all right, if you're a mountain guide, and you're climbing a dangerous mountain or a significant mountain, there's probably not much information that guide has that the group wouldn't want to hear. Even if it's, hey, in about an hour, we're going to have some weather, so be ready for that. Or, hey, looks like we're making good time. We actually might make it to the top 40 minutes earlier than we thought. And then sometimes it's critical. Hey, we need to change direction, change in plans or something like that. And so I feel like they did a really good job getting that information to us. And then I always try to remind my leaders, like when we have a meeting or we have a strategy session, that session is only partially for them, right? Like they need to be on the same page, but the rest of that needs to be, okay, now take this information. If you just take it and know it, it's pretty ineffective. You have to distill it down and get it to the people that you lead, in an appropriate way to them, so that they also know the guy at the back of the hike needs enough information to have proper vision to get it finished. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that just sort of that chain of command or that process of, your CEO and your leadership being in Washington and getting that information distilled and making it consistent and clear and understandable so that it goes all the way and makes its way to the customer is probably a really critical challenge.
And then how much of it the customer, because most of it in like our industry with regulation, customer doesn't know most of it and doesn't need to know about most of it. Really, at the individual site, like where our need or where our like product solves a problem is basically like the US way of creating and consuming power is outdated. And now with the massive influx of energy demand that's coming because of AI, because of data centers, because of electrification of transportation, just because of the way that we can, there's more people on the planet than there used to be. And each of those people plugs in more stuff than they used to before. And so our infrastructure and grid was built for a different time and a different power consumption profile. And so at the end of the day, we need more power. It needs to be sustainable. And we need to have a way to distribute it around that's not burning coal, gas, and oil. And so for the customer, like policies come and go, those things change. A lot of the job of our leaders is how do we get favorable conditions so that we can solve that customer problem? And how can we tell that story to customers in the most simple and engaging way so that they know what to do?
And I'm just curious since there have been so many different changes in the solar world, and I think a lot of misunderstanding around the tax advantages or the rebates and I don't know whether they're still around, and I don't know enough about solar itself. But I know as
You're
a
like,
potential,
that's how they are.
I need to be I know, I don't have it. I need to, I'll talk to you about it. But I know there's a lot of questions as to whether the tax incentives are still there and what is the real cost benefit analysis of solar. And for a new salesperson coming on and having to deal with perhaps some consumer education and some consumer trust issues potentially, how do you ramp those new hires up to have the level of understanding that you have, and how do you get them sort of prepared for those conversations?
Yeah, great. So our CEO, Mary Powell, said something to me once that really taught me something when you're doing sales at scale. She said, you standardize and then give autonomy. That's how you do it. So we have, I don't know, 5,000 salespeople in our org. There's tons, right? And we're growing. We're onboarding 500 to 700 people into my channels every single month. So the amount of people, if you break that down into our individual teams, it's 5 to 10 people per team per week, right? Like it's a lot of people that come in, and not only are they learning a new industry, they're learning, and each of them has, the solar product itself. Okay, we're putting renewable energy on homes, but now we do battery backup. And we actually have a couple different kinds or classifications of customer leasing products that we do. And so they have to learn that. Then there's different like policies, and there's different like permit processes per like township and city and things like that. And then it's direct to home sales, which is different than traditional sales. And so they have to learn the product. They have to learn how to like some of the construction policies. And then they also have to learn how to like meet with a customer and like create a problem and walk them through a solution and transition. And so the way that we've been able to do it is this kind of idea of standardizing and giving autonomy. If we said to every sales leader, train your reps, that's what we used to do when we were small. And we had really good sales leaders. And so when you're small, everybody kind of does the same job. So for example, like if you and me, like Ed, started a business and we're two guys with some ambition and it's a startup, there's a very good chance that you're going to be like the sales guy and the finance guy. And honestly, you might be the operations guy. And then some
Right.
days you might also be calling the electrician because the power went out. And I'm
Yeah.
probably the same thing. You know what I mean? I could be handling logistics and shipping, and I also could be closing a finance deal because there's no one else to do it. But once you get bigger, you specialize, right? And so basically what we do is we have a training program, and we have somebody that's a high level like leader. It's actually my younger brother who I've worked with for 20 years. So he
Wow.
oversees training for the company. And so his job is, my philosophy on sales training and customer messaging is it can't be easy for the customer to understand. It has to be impossible for them to misunderstand. You have to distill the idea to the simplest form of the idea so that they can grasp it and it can make sense when they're barely paying attention to you, right? I mean,
Yep.
we're doorstep, right?
That's
So like,
great.
so if I'm talking to you on your doorstep, I'm not talking to Ed Kerr on his doorstep. I'm talking to a man who is dealing with life inside of his house, who might have an earbud in, who just came from work, and who has something coming up. And so if I get initially 15% of your attention, that's actually pretty good. I hope that by the end of the conversation, I have 30% before I transition into your home. So you need to be able to explain this to an intellectual person as if they're 8 and have that be efficient. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so basically what our training aims to do is get to the core of the issue and explain it in as few words as possible so that then we can spend time building a relationship. Most of like a door approach in a sales process and an educational like sit down inside of the house, if you're doing it right on the initial contact, you're probably 50-50. 50% problem solution transition, 50% who are you? How long have you lived here? Have you seen this? Who am I speaking to? And do I like you? Do you like me? Like, could we create a business relationship that might go somewhere without wasting your time, without wasting my time in a productive way? Then once we get into the home and we're sitting down in the sales presentation, that probably shifts to about 70-30. It's mostly like, who are you? Who am I? While we're getting like the deal done. But by the time we're closing the deal, it's 5 to 10% business, 90% relationship stuff, but still moving in a productive way. And so a lot of our training teaches the meat or the business part of your presentation needs to have these 3 steps, and it all needs to sound the same. So hopefully if you take our sales force and we're doing a good job and you were to ask them, what's the problem? What's the solution? How do you transition? Those answers would all be very similar. Again, you standardize, and then you give autonomy by you say, but you and I are different people, so go connect with the customer in a productive way. And you can use these tactics, but if you were to listen to 2 presentations, they would sound different. Until you got to the meat of the presentation, it would sound almost exactly the same. Does that make
Does.
sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that you've got a super strong handle, and obviously you've had a ton of experience. And if you're onboarding that many people consistently month over month, that's a huge task. I mean, that's admirable that you're able to do that. And to keep it simple is almost, I mean, it's a necessity. You've got to distill
It's
it
an
in,
effect.
so
Yeah,
that's
that
great.
idea of don't make it easy to understand, make it impossible to misunderstand.
I
Like
love that. Yeah.
you have to, you said in there, how do you get people to know what you know? That's when you take a new salesperson, right? They're simple by necessity because they don't know enough to make it complicated. So I think of this in think of like MMA, think of like mixed martial arts fighting. If you're my fight trainer and I am brand new, okay, you need to get me like the most effective basics so that I can kind of function. So
Yeah.
you might
Don't let that guy get you on the ground because he's a really good grappler. Right?
perfect.
That's it.
Try
Right.
with stand up, and you need like a good lead straight. You need like a good lead straight. That's what you'll throw 1,000 times and whatever. And so maybe I do that for a couple of weeks. And then what's going to happen is my confidence, especially with salespeople, they're ambitious, they're personable, they're developmental, they want to get better. And so you
Uh-huh.
might show me how to throw like a lead straight, and I'm going to land a couple, and then my confidence is going to go like hollow and high, right? It's going to
Yeah.
be pretty baseless, but I'm going to be feeling really good because I've learned
Uh-huh.
something and this is fun. And oh, maybe I'm a good fighter. And then I might be watching somebody else and I might see, oh, this more advanced guy does spinning heel kicks, right? And you would say to me, Ty, now is not the time for a spinning heel kick. And honestly, you don't use those very often. They're a once in a blue moon, it might be
Uh-huh.
effective type thing. And so the biggest thing that I can do is as I start to learn more things, not use them, right? Like it's
Yeah.
keep this simple. And so oftentimes we have like salespeople and they come in and they learn the pitch and they keep it simple and they have some success. And then after a couple of weeks, they start to learn more and they want to use the things that they've learned,
Uh-huh.
and they end up complicating the process and their sales go down, and then they get bummed up or bummed out. And when they start to come out of that first sales slump, it's generally two things that pull them out. I learned this very early in sales. Number one, quick and easy. Go back to the basics. Go back to your lead straight. Number two, everybody's doing it. You want to connect people and make it simple. And if you can do that, you'll generally have really good sales volume. And so when we go into neighborhoods, like our form of selling is one of the most like, it's one of the most like raw kinds of sales because
Mhm.
I'm going directly to the customer where they're using the product in a community.
Yep.
And so if I want to have success, if you said you don't have solar on your home. So if I want to have success, I need to connect with you, clearly communicate that I'm a professional. You may, y- you know, I we may have a couple things in common. I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm working with everybody out here. That's
Uh-huh.
enough to maybe buy me a couple of minutes so that we can talk. Then once I get into your house, we might start a friendship, right?
Uh-huh.
But the friendship is going to be based on you have this need that you weren't looking at before. It's what I do. We can handle it for you. And guess what? It's going to be pretty easy. And I'm doing it for 75 people in this community. So you're in good hands.
Yep.
Once I start complicating it, that's where we get into problems. So it's
Yeah.
a constant game of learning and keeping that information on the back burner. And again, most good fighters don't do spinning heel kicks. They can if they
Mm-hmm.
need to, but generally don't.
And on your sale, is your sale, does it typically happen in one conversation, or is it something that it's done over 2 or 3 meetings, or
Yeah,
how
great.
does?
Generally two or three. It takes a second, right? I mean,
Yep.
what we're essentially doing is we're taking you off the power plan that you're on right now and we're putting you on a better one that gives
Mhm.
you more options, that gives you better pricing, and it gives you some more capabilities. So one of the big things that we do now is we'll do backup batteries on just about every home that we do this for. It's a pretty new concept to most people. And so for some people, it just takes a second. It takes a second for them to wrap their head around it. I mean, we're putting you in a 25-year power contract with a company that you met on your doorstep. So
Right.
some people had solar in their previous home. And again, this is where we give autonomy and I'm sorry, where we standardize and give autonomy. We have a sales process that if you're ready, Ed, I can take you through it in 15 minutes. If you're like most people where you're aware but not fully informed, probably take 2 visits, about an hour and a half combined, and we'll probably text back and forth a couple of times.
Yep.
But if you're on the like adoption curve there from like innovator to early adopter to, all the way out to laggard, if you're a laggard, we could talk 6, 7, 8 times. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
could
Yeah.
with 50
Yep.
customers. So in a standard case, it's generally we'll meet you at the property. It's nice because we generally have like we don't generally just blind knock doors. I generally know who you are, know how long you've lived in the house. We have technology that helps us with that,
Yep.
but also we network through communities. So a lot of people would say I never buy anything door to door. And I'm like, well, I don't really sell a thing door to door. Basically what I do is I link people in the community together and I help them be aware of a problem that they have and then I solve it. So it's one of those things that it feels a lot more natural than you're probably expecting. I would call you by name. I generally know that you're the homeowner. I generally know how long you've been in the house, and we've generally serviced a big group of people around you. Where do you live?
Okay. Kansas City.
So not in, I actually love Kansas City, by the way.
Do
I
you?
did home automation sales out there. It's one of like
Oh, really?
yeah,
Okay.
it's one of the places on my list that I could live. I lived in Liberty. I love it out there. But Generally, like if I were to knock your door and we were doing home automation, I'd
Mm-hmm.
have a list of thousands of people around you that have already done this before. I generally know like automation. So we're talking like crime stats. We're talking like the kind of technology people are using on their homes. And so I generally know what someone like you that lives where you live, that earns what you earn, that has lived there for as long as they have, has the kind of family you make up. I generally know what kinds of products and service you're interested in, and I generally know what's happening in the community. And so when I approach you, I'm approaching you with your name, with the time you've been in the home, with 10 or 15 other people that you probably know, and what I've already done for them. And so
That's awesome.
it feels
Mm-hmm.
very natural. It feels very normal, and I don't feel like a stranger at the door. I feel like, oh, I'm just catching you up on what I'm doing. And it's actually faster to just knock your door and talk to you than try to run
Mm-hmm.
you down another way. Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. I mean, it feels like you've kind of thought of everything. Of course, you've been doing it for a long time and
Yeah, I've been doing direct to home sales for 22 years. So, and
wow.
now I oversee an org that does it. And so it's one thing to kind of figure it out. The thing that fascinates me about leadership is how do I get somebody that maybe didn't walk the same path as me to have more success than I've had, you know? And so it's one thing for me to figure it out. It's again, it's kind of like being a player coach.
Yep.
Like maybe you're a natural athlete and you can like, you can be on a basketball court and you can figure out ways to be a little bit more efficient, or you can watch other people, or maybe you've had, different coaching through your life that makes you kind of like developmental and get better. But then
Uh-huh.
once you say, hey, here's a novice that doesn't know what to do, teach him. Now it's like, okay, maybe I'm not as ambitious as you. Maybe I'm not as talented as you were. Maybe I'm
Uh-huh.
coming at a different time. How do you get that guy to have a better result than you've had? And that's why leadership is a completely different skill than salesmanship.
That was a great point. I think sales leadership and try to empower somebody, particularly someone who's brand new, and understanding the differences that they have from you, whether it's, as you mentioned, ambition, motivation, talent, but trying to empower someone to be the best that they can be it takes a certain awareness and a certain patience and a certain, I think, understanding of human nature. And I think every organization has so many different people coming through the door every week, yours especially with such volume. How do you manage churn? And how do you empower people and give people the kind of autonomy that you need to give them in your sales process and do that at scale efficiently and do it across different leaders? I mean, that seems to
Yeah.
be like incredibly difficult.
Yeah, so it starts with I heard that I think it was Seth Godin that said this quote that really resonated with me. He said it's at the end of a quote, but as he essentially says, a leader takes it personal. There's so many people that say, don't take it personal, it's just business, but leadership and sales is a people business. So it's like telling a basketball player, hey, don't take it personal. It's like, dude, he's giving his body and his heart and his life to that game. It is personal, right?
Uh,
And so I think it starts with the people that are coming to you are not random faceless people. They're people entrusted to your care. Like they are taking a chance on you. So we take care of those that take a chance on us. That is one of the like core philosophies that when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I mean, we're 100% commission." So if they
uh-huh.
say, "I'm going to jump," they might have a family, they might have a mortgage, they definitely have bills to pay. But more than that, like this isn't a job, this is an opportunity. We don't pay you for showing up here. We give you the skills to create the kind of life you want. And so that's a real stewardship. That's like a real kind of like honor and a burden at the same time. And so it really starts with our leaders understanding that the people that they're taking a chance on you, you got to take care of them. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of like the premier vision part. Then there's got to be metrics that gauge their success, because at scale, if you don't have those metrics figured out, you very quickly lose touch as to how effective you're being. And so we have certain metrics that these are essentially our metrics. We look at how many people we hire. First of all, we look at how many people apply, like how many
Uh-huh.
people to be onboarded, and then how many we hire. So there's a certain ratio and that we want to maintain. The biggest one for me is how many people we hire versus how many people start. So starting for us is a sales activity. It means, did you actually go out into the street and create a proposal with a real person?
Uh-huh.
And if you like onboard with us and pass your background and then you never get a sales activity, we hired you, but you didn't start. If you get hired and then you go out and you actually create a proposal, you've started. So we need to make sure that number is tight. I like that number to be above 80%, which if it's low, if I'm starting 20% of the people that we hire, I'm probably hiring too many people, or I don't have a good enough process to get you going. But you're a person that took a chance on us and we didn't come through for you. So that's like the first step. Then after that, we have a training program that accompanies the rep's first initial, like pretty much quarter of sales.
Yeah.
They get different training, they get different competitions, and then they get different metrics to kind of get them started. But in that first quarter, we want to get them to the point that they're hitting the base standard for our active sales force, because in the next quarter they go into, those are going to be their metrics. So it's metrics for how many people they, how many accounts they create, how many accounts they close, and eventually how many accounts they install. So we look at how many people applied and how many people did we hire. We look at hires to starts, and then we look at start to graduation, essentially. Like they hit those metrics in the first quarter. And if those numbers are low for the organization, then it tells us kind of what levers to pull. We either need to do a better job with how we're finding people. We either need to do a better job with like the expectations that we're giving people. But really, once you have those numbers, it's really only 3 or 4 things that if you're having poor results, that it could be. And so starting with the core philosophy for everybody that, hey, we're not throwing the mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's not what we do. What we do is we're very careful about who we hire. We make sure they know what they're getting into. We make sure we know what we're getting into, and don't hire somebody that you don't think can do it or doesn't want to do it. But then once they're hired, that's a you thing. So once they're hired, you make sure that you get them started and that they get a sales activity. And if you have high hires to low starts, you're probably running a kind of a more shoddy program. You're kind of running a throw the mud at the wall program, and that doesn't work, right? Like if you have a program where your hires are high and your starts are low, I would look at it and say you're not being a very efficient manager. You're not being a very good leader. Now, if your hires are high and your starts are high, good. You did a good job like getting them to the neighborhood, but then your graduation is low. Okay, now we have a developmental problem. Maybe it's training, maybe going out with them and seeing them in the field. But the thing that I found is if your philosophy is right and everybody agrees, and then you've done the work to pick the right metrics, understanding the metrics will tell you what to do. You don't have to be a great intuitive sales leader if you have the right metrics. It's like if you're my personal trainer and I come to you and I understand what you're about, and maybe you say, hey, I'm about elite performance. I'm about taking somebody and getting them to like their full potential. I don't screw around. Okay, if you've clearly communicated that to me and that's what I want, we're going to work well together. Yeah. If I'm hey, my wife kind of wanted me to see if I could lose a couple of pounds, I called you, and I sign up, like we're gonna bug each other. You're gonna think I'm lazy. I'm gonna think you're aggressive. It's just a bad fit. So if that's who you are and you say, hey, I get people to elite performance, and then I'm not seeing results, it's probably my diet or my workout. And honestly, that's kind of it. It's like, you don't have to be a genius to know that once I know what my metrics are, I can look at the data, and then based on that data, it will tell me what to do. So then after we get the metrics right, then we just build the systems, right? So if we say, hey, we start 80% of the people that we hire, you just ask yourself the question, what system do I need to implement to make sure that 80% of those that we start gets hired? Then you start coming up with ideas like, okay, well, we should do a training program. Cool. What should the training program look like? Maybe it's what regional big group meeting followed by 3 times a week, one-on-one mentoring and shadowing twice a week. Try it. Now that's where the work is done in the system. So like the setting the vision of, who are we and what problem do we aim to solve? Setting the metrics. If we hit these metrics, will we be hitting our vision? And then setting our systems, what can we do to get that 80%, or what can we do to get 50% of our people to graduate? Then the work is done in the systems, because you screw up all the time. You say, maybe it's not, maybe it's not a regional meeting. Maybe it's a one-on-one meeting. Maybe it's not 2 shadow sessions. Maybe it's 4. Maybe that rep doesn't talk for the first 3 days and just follows somebody, but that's the day-to-day tooling of the systems. And then once the metrics start showing up, you lock in the system that's working, and then you broadcast that out to the whole group and say, hey, this works. And until someone finds something that works better, use this. And then someone finds something that works better, we institute that kind of broadly. And that's how we go bit by bit, kind of leveling up,
Yeah. Very impressive. I love it. I love your process. I love the way you explained everything. If you were speaking, and as we'll kind of wrap up here, but as if you were speaking to a new sales leader, either with a different company or somebody internal, what would be the one bit of advice that you would give them as they assume that role?
This is like my favorite people to work with. New leaders are my favorite. They're my favorite because they're teachable, right? Like they're so hungry to like grow that they'll do the things. If I only had one piece of advice, I would simply tell them to be impressive, be the clear choice. People don't want to follow somebody that's not impressive. You don't want to watch an athlete that's not better than you, right? You would imagine you're watching the Masters and the guy shoots like an 89. And you're like, I
Right.
could shoot an 89. You want to
Uh-huh.
see somebody like, and they rose from the ashes and they've been traveling and they've been doing this for 20 years and they are 10 strokes ahead of the next closest guy who's world class. So again, we strategically changed the titles throughout the entire org that we don't have any managers anymore. Nobody manages people. This is 100% commission. This is people they can earn in like the top percentage of Americans, but they have to build it. And you don't build things by managing them, you build things by leading. So everybody is a leader. We have senior market leaders, we have market leaders, we have talent leaders, we have performance leaders, but they're all leaders. There's no managers. And so the best way that I would say to be impressive is in a sales and a leadership environment, it's impossible over time to separate who you are from what you do. So if you're about positive leadership and good communication and instilling belief in people, but you're a jerk to your wife
Uh-huh.
or respectful to the waiter or you know what I mean? Like eventually that stuff catches up to you. And so I simply look at like, are you impressing yourself? Do you have goals that challenge you? And it's everything. And like I would start with being impressive in the language that the people that you lead know. So one difference
Mhm.
with our business is all of our sales managers sales
Uh-huh.
lead. All of
Huh.
our sales leaders sell. In a lot of places, once you get promoted to a manager, you no longer sell, you just manage salespeople. In a 1099 commission opportunity-based job, people don't follow leaders because of their title. They're ambitious, they're entrepreneurial, they really don't care. They
Yeah.
follow people that can help them get where they want to go. And so, when I was a district manager or when I was a market leader, we call them now, I would just try to double everybody else's sales. So not only would I lead the group, but I would sell twice as much as the standard asked me to sell.
Uh-huh.
And what I found when I did that is all of the things that I would try to do, they just got this massive like exclamation mark behind them. Like I remember, have you seen Lone Survivor, like the movie or read the book?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this part in Lone Survivor where Marcus Luttrell takes you through like the Buds training and it kind of like spawned a whole bunch of Navy SEAL books and movies and stuff. But I remember his because he dedicated like a third of the book to the Navy SEAL training. And if I remember correctly, it was him and his brother. I think it took Marcus a couple times to get through it. But one
Uh-huh.
of the times he talks about, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy that took him through Buds, the instructor that took him through it. And he was a guy in his mid 50s and he was just this strong guy. And so I think about that guy. So that guy is a former SEAL and he trains like the nation's elite warriors. That guy has nothing to prove. But how did he lead? How did he lead these ambitious SEAL hopefuls to graduate? Well, he talks about, they're on the beach at one point and they're doing this run underweight, like they're all loaded up and they've been running forever. And just at the point when Marcus feels like he can't run any longer, he looks up and this dude that's twice his age is running backwards. He's literally running the same thing that he's asking them to do backwards. And so immediately what happens? Well, that leader doesn't have to say, come on, Marcus, you can do it. Look at all
Uh-huh.
these other people. I know someone like you. All he has to do is be the embodiment of what he's teaching, and the visual levels everybody up. You don't have to say a thing. It's so much more impactful. It's so much more effective, right? It's all of the pieces of communication that are nonverbal, which is the overwhelming percentage of communication. There's another time when they're doing push-ups and same thing. He's like, just when I thought I literally couldn't do another one, I look up and this sucker's doing them on one hand. He's literally doing one-armed push-ups. And so you just immediately take courage. And so what I learned from that is if there's no question as to why you're in the role, like there's no question as to why that guy was training the nation's warriors. And further, he probably been through butts. He probably does that very thing 6 times a year. This is a person
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't do it once. And so, long-winded answer, but if there's one piece of advice to a leader, simply be impressive. Be the clear choice. Clearly, that guy was to be the SEAL instructor, clearly. And I don't even need to explain to you why.
Yeah.
It's universally understood. That's the thing that will help people more than any other thing. You don't have to have the best ideas. You don't have to be the smartest. You You don't have to be the most creative. You should and do have to be the most impressive. Doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means you're a couple steps ahead of everybody else in the lesson and trying harder than everybody else. And usually if you're doing that, it will level the group up and create the kind of culture that you want. So that's, if I had one piece, that's what I would say.
That's awesome, man. That's so well said. I love it. And when you were giving that example of the SEAL trainer, reminded me of David Goggins, and all the
Yeah.
Goggins stories are just, that's impressive. But if you can't be Goggins, at least you could be impressive in various ways, right? Maybe not
Yeah.
physically, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
and you know
love
what's
that.
impressive is effort is impressive. Like you get a lot of in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's one of like my favorite books. Maxwell, between that and the 5 levels of leadership, he's kind of written like the Bible of leadership in those. But what he talks about is he talks about mistakes in character. So he says, if you're going to be, you have strategy and you have character, and if you're going to be without one, be without strategy. People will forgive mistakes and missteps in strategy and in skill, but they almost won't and can't forget mistakes of character. And so the thing I like about that is it actually means that anybody can do it, right? Like I don't have to be overly skilled. I just have to have really high character and be relentlessly committed to trying. And that's impressive. Like when you watch a Rocky movie, and the first movie he gets beat and everybody was inspired. It created a whole career, it created a whole like industry of movies, right? But it's like everybody knows what it's like to try harder for longer, and that's impressive. And so as long as you're trying hard, like I'll tell my leaders sometimes, like some of my leaders aren't the best salespeople, always. Like when I was leading teams, I had a person on my team almost double my personal sales. And I was almost double everybody else. So I was really good. He was insanely good.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, I tried so hard and I put so much effort in that people could see I was working later than everybody else. I was at the office earlier than everybody else. I was trying, I was reading the books. And so it just made it feel like, okay, it's not that I was born with a innate ability. I'm working at, and it's raining and I'm still outside. And those are the things, like humans respect effort, right? And if you're
Yep.
putting forth effort with good character, you're kind of in a situation you can't lose. And so a lot of our sales leaders, we tell them like, hey, go out and sell. And they're like, honestly, like I'm not the best salesperson in my office. And I always tell them like, you're in a position where you can't lose. If you go out today and you sell more than everybody else, well, great. You just set an example that it's clear why you're in that position. However, if you go out and you get your butt kicked and you pull a 0, well, you're just like everybody else and you're human. And if Ed didn't sell, maybe there's hope for me yet. You can't lose, right? As long as you're willing to put yourself in the arena and do it for the right reasons and be the example, you actually can't lose.
Love it. That's great. Well, Di, hey man, you've been an awesome guest. Love listening to you. This could go on for another hour if it were just, if it's fantastic. Thank you so much. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks for
All right.
having me out. I appreciate it. It was really nice to meet you.